Welcome again to another amazing episode of Design to Convert. In today's show, my guest is Jessie Healy from Webtopia. She's the CEO of Webtopia, an agency that specializes in growing e-commerce brands through Facebook ads, Instagram, TikTok, Google ads, as well as email marketing on Klaviyo. In addition to running Webtopia, she's also a coach for e-commerce startups, helping people get set up before they're ready to scale through an agency. Jessie, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
This is so much fun. I love talking to people in the trenches, all around the world, seeing what they're working on, how they're building, how they view the world. I just recently stumbled upon you, and I was going through some of your tweets. So I know that there's a lot of really cool stuff we can dive into today. But just to kind of set the stage, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Webtopia.
Yeah, sure. So Webtopia has been around. We're coming up for our fifth birthday this year, which is crazy. I don't know where the time has
Congratulations.
gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So prior to starting the agency, I'd actually never worked in an agency. I'd been client side, so for most of my career, working for mostly consumer brands. And I'd been that person hiring and firing agencies, honestly, and emphasis on the firing because I had the same experience over and over again where they would walk in these fancy salespeople, they would do this great pitch about how strategic they were, and then they would come along and they would put the most junior people possible on the accounts. And me as the person heading up the growth inside the team, I would lead the whole strategy and they would just end up being, order takers and implementers. And I just felt like there was a place for an agency that could actually partner with the brand and help them form a strategy that, help them actually come up with a strategy that works so that those founders can get on with all the other business of scaling, like, developing new products, fixing their, production, making sure their customer service is working. And so we partner with brands and really help them come up with those strategies that work. And because we're so focused on e-commerce, we really know what works across our basket of brands and across the landscape. And we can really support brands with their growth strategies and helping them, come up with really great ideas for growing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So give us a sense of scale here. So, we've talked to a lot of folks that are, one person armies. We've talked to people that have a huge roster, a huge team. So kind of where do you fit like team size and maybe like client size?
Yeah, sure. So we're very much in like the boutique agency kind of section. So I have a team of 20 around the world, and we're now a 7-figure agency. We hit 7 figures about a year ago, making us in the top 2% of female-owned businesses. I always like to say that because I think it's awesome.
That's huge. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. And yeah, in terms of client size, we help brands that are, 7 figures and up really, or getting close to that or keen to scale to that as quickly as possible. But I guess it's probably the 7-figure to 8-figure range is where is our sweet spot. So brands spending anything upwards of 20K a month on ads, it's, that's a good time to come and talk to us and we'll help you scale beyond that and hit your growth goals.
So, you mentioned that your career started being on the client side, and a big part of it was just that frustration of, okay, they wheel on the fancy stuff, but then you've got like very inexperienced people, or not necessarily inexperienced, but just junior level, like they're not thinking holistically about the business.
Yeah.
So, having that experience, what's been the number one lesson that you took when you started Webtopia?
That's a good question. The number one lesson that I took from being client side into running an agency, I think is, how do I put this? Like clients want you to come up with ideas. They actually want you to challenge them. They don't want you to just sit and do what they say. And sure, there's some clients that aren't like that, and they're probably not a good fit for us if that's the case. But generally, like, I think why we've been so successful is me from the get-go when I was freelancing before I started the agency, I was actually quite challenging to my clients and I was able to have those hard conversations about what they were doing wrong or what they weren't doing. So I think that kind of insight, having been on the other side of the table so long and knowing that I wanted to hear what I needed to change inside the businesses I worked for, that's kind of how I've built the agency to be more of like a sparring partner. Yeah.
And in that process of being to your point, to use your words, a sparring partner, what are some of the techniques or the tactics that you and your team use to actually get to that level?
So in terms of media buying tactics and techniques, do you mean?
Just in general, just kind of on a philosophical level. Like, I'm sure for you, it may come naturally, or like you've had the full arc, but how, when you're, bringing on a new team member, do you say, hey, like, it's not just, I'm not going to tell you, or you're not going to just be given a directive from the client. You have to go out and, be like, actually critically think about the problems that the client faces. How do you train that?
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's hiring the right people. And I think we've learned that over the years. So we really look for a certain kind of, I guess, character trait in our team. So we want them to be curious. We want them to be problem solvers. We want them to be people that can think strategically. So when we are looking at media buyers that might want to come and work for us, we look at like their hard skills and what they've done before, but then we really test them on those kind of attributes to make sure that they're not just following a rule book, and actually they can think up new ideas and research and come up with ideas. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is giving our team the thinking space and time to be able to come up with new ideas and be strategic. If you overload your media buyers with 10 accounts each, and they are overloaded with reporting and ad building and doing all of the things that just to keep the account running, they are not going to have the time to be strategic and to think and to research the industry. So we really make sure we build that in, and we have probably in the industry, we're at the very low end in terms of number of clients per team member, and we're constantly assessing that and looking at how their time is being spent. How can we be more efficient with things like automation or making reporting simpler, that kind of thing, so that the team have that extra head time to be strategic and think outside the box, as it were.
One of the things, just being on your Twitter, that I noticed, it's your pinned tweet actually, which is about the playbook that e-commerce brands actually, in your opinion, actually do have. It's like there is a playbook that you can run, but the reality is most people don't actually run it correctly, or they don't check off all the things. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So this is a real kind of favorite topic of mine, because when you're in the industry of e-com, you start to absorb, there is this playbook that everyone understands, that everyone in the industry who's good at what they do and who's successfully grown e-com brands kind of knows that there's some fundamentals that need to be there. Now, there's of course subtleties and nuances to how you apply that playbook. And, some brands, for instance, are much better suited to Google ads than they are to Facebook ads, or vice versa. Or maybe TikTok's going to be, absolutely the one for them, and they're not going to do as well on Facebook or Instagram. So there's nuances and you have to test. But even, I guess, the playbook requires you to do those tests, look at the data, and then make decisions based on that. But what really surprises me is, despite the fact that this playbook kind of exists and is pretty well documented across the internet, on YouTube and all over the place, it's so common that I will audit a brand who's, been on paper pretty successful or got quite far, or maybe they're a brand that's been struggling and stumbling and they haven't figured out why, and they're missing key elements of the playbook. They don't have a welcome series in place, or they haven't looked at their post-purchase flow for 2 years and it's completely out of date and has kind of random things in it. Or they are using outdated media buying tactics, or they're not using UGC in their user-generated content in their ads at all, or they don't have reviews on their site for some bizarre reason. And it really surprises me how often you'll come across key elements that are missing that could really take a brand's performance up so much higher if they just had those things actually ticked off and in place.
If there was one reason that you could attribute to it, like, what would be the why behind why brands don't do this? Is it a lack of knowledge? Is it just bandwidth constraints? Or what's like the number one?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think sometimes it's lack of knowledge. Sometimes it's like founder kind of blindness, where they have like a fixed idea in their head that, this seems crazy now in 2023, but if they do reviews, they're going to get bad reviews, and that's going to tank their conversion rate. I think what's
the largest company you've seen that's like, from like a revenue perspective, that's just not doing any sort of review collection? Because I'm actually like terrified of 7-figure brands that just don't have, like, if that exists. I'm struggling to believe that.
I know, it's amazing. I mean, it's funny because I started my business in the UK and I spend most of my time hanging out with kind of US ecom kind of thinkers, and a lot of our clients are based in the US and the UK. But I moved to New Zealand a year ago and it shocks me. I feel bad talking about my country like this, but it shocks me how many like big box retailers here, you know, household names that sell online, because I live in a small town and I had to buy furniture remotely without visiting any of the stores, don't have close-ups of the close-up pictures of the product. You can't see the fabric, you can't see the material, don't have any video, and don't have reviews. Like, it's insane. So yeah, that's, I mean, in certain countries, like New Zealand's a pretty advanced country, but like in certain countries, I think you'll find there's some, especially I think retailers that have gone D2C that were traditionally brick and mortar stores. You'll see a lot of that like slowness to adopt the ecom playbook. But if they did, my God, they could really stream ahead. So that would probably be where I'd look if I was in the US trying to find examples of brands that weren't doing it. It would be those more old school retailers that have gone online, just relying on their reputation to get people to buy. Yeah.
And then going back to the why question, do you think do you think the why is different between, like someone who's been really successful versus someone who is just struggling to get along?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes I see brands that are successful despite missing lots of elements of the playbook, which is because their product is just so damn good. And maybe they're really great at some other element of their marketing, and that's kind of like hidden the fact that they're missing this other element.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked with a brand for a number of years who was just mega successful because their product was so unique in their space. So it ticked the box. I always say the perfect ecom is mass markets with a unique tweak or something like a product that everyone needs or a large portion of the market needs, but where it's like a unique, innovative version of that thing everyone needs. So they had that in spades. They had great social media and they just didn't do email marketing at all. They didn't have their flows set up for years and they were still really successful. So I think they were like just running ahead, fulfilling those orders. Like they could only just keep up in terms of ordering enough, to keep up with how well our ads were doing for them. And so they didn't need to add that extra element. Pandemic as well, I think, slowed people down in terms of they got so much, their results were bolstered so much they could just rely on ads and not worry so much about the other aspects of their marketing. And then that all went away. And this is now where like the competition is so fierce and it's so much harder to succeed in ecom that I think brands are really getting much more sophisticated in terms of actually applying the elements of the playbook for sure.
What's the scariest thing you've ever seen in ecom? And you can define scary however you want to, like throughout your career, whether it's on client side or the agency side. What is what kept you up for the most number of nights?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. I might have to come back to that one. The scariest thing, like in terms of just bad marketing,
bad execution. Just like you get into a email marketing account and there's like not a single thing set up. I mean, I'm sure that happens quite often.
Yeah, I mean the email marketing, it shocks me how often that's neglected. Like if I could guess one thing that's the most often neglected, I'd say it's probably email. For some reason people find ads really sexy and really kind of like the results are so instant and so measurable. Until a few years ago especially, they were very, very, very measurable, and so people just kind of got so addicted to them that they neglected other things. It's a really interesting to me one why it's so hard sometimes to persuade brands the importance of email. Saw a stat recently that even if you're using like a really expensive, well, not expensive, but a premium agency to do it all for you, your return will still be 10x on that money you're spending with the agency, just because the channel's so powerful in terms of what it delivers. So yeah.
Do you when you talk to clients or just people in the community at large, do you run into a lot of people who still say, "Oh, like email doesn't work for my brand"? That's because I've heard that, especially with more and more recently, I think, than before. But is that something that you ever encounter?
Yeah, and I think like a lot of brands will say, especially if they're like a single product, as in like a product you only buy once. So we've
Mhm.
got a few clients like that where so the argument for email as a retention strategy is is not as strong versus like fashion, beauty, food and drink, where we're absolutely reliant on the lifetime value being high in order to justify the acquisition cost. So maybe they're not saying that it won't work for their brand, but that it's not worth the time and investment because they might only get a 10% repeat customer rate from all that effort of sending out all those emails. Yeah, that would probably be the main argument I think people make against it. Or they kind of, I think the other thing that holds people back is if they didn't start their list, gathering emails 2 years ago, so they have no list now, so the return's not going to be instant like it is on Facebook. And yeah, I think there's a high percentage of entrepreneurs who are ADHD and they want instant dopamine, and like it's too slow. SEO is too slow, email marketing is too slow for them. So
The SEO too slow thing is actually, I'll admit, I have always felt that way until maybe like 3 months ago for e-commerce
yeah,
specifically. So I'm like, oh, there's no way. It's not worth investing into. And then you see like brands like Ridge Wallet, for example, buying whole businesses that are built on SEO and all this organic traffic to help bolster their top of funnel activities. Like, have you always believed in SEO for e-commerce, or is that something that you had to switch into?
Yeah, it's a really funny one. That's a great question because I started my career doing a lot of SEO. So I'm going to age myself, but in the mid 2000s, when Facebook ads didn't exist, like you had Google ads in its early stages and you had SEO, and like you kind of had to focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew a lot about it back in the day, but then being a little dopamine addicted myself, like the channel that I just found a lot of fun to work on was Facebook ads. I could explain to my clients very quickly what was happening. I could show a deliverable result. I think agencies in the SEO space have a much harder kind of sales pitch to make. Um, but yes, I mean, we work with a really cool agency called Blink SEO. I've actually had them on my podcast if anyone wants to look it up, and they do amazing stuff for ecom. And they're great with, especially like they're really good with the kind of multi-product brands that have, a fair number of SKUs. And they've been doing some really cool stuff with using collection pages, which rank really well in Google. So you kind of guide the user to find, someone's looking for red pants. You create a page all about red pants with all the different red pant options. And you've guided the consumer so well. Google loves that, and you can kind of punch above your weight in your industry by doing some clever stuff like that. So, I mean, that's a tactic, but I definitely, chatting to Sam about SEO has really opened my eyes to how much, you know, potential SEO has for ecom and especially, depends on the category. They have to be kind of a search type of brand. So again, a category where there's already existing demand. You can't create demand from SEO very easily. But if they're in a category, fashion, beauty, food, anything, baby product, that people are already searching for, you're gonna be wise to invest in SEO, I think.
So, a lot of the stuff that you just mentioned, there's a lot of demand capture versus demand generation. Is that one of the kind of the delineating factors that, like, I guess if you're running a brand that requires or has prioritizes demand capture more so, like maybe you should invest in SEO sooner than demand capture? Is that like an easy
Yeah.
framework to think through?
Yeah, I would say so. When you're sitting down and deciding, if you're starting your brand, you're deciding which channels, you've got to figure out and it's amazing how many people don't kind of understand this that are new to marketing. Is your product something someone wakes up in the morning and wants, independently of you getting in front of them, and they're going to go to Google and search for? Now, if that's the case, then SEO and paid search are both going to work for you. I'd say there's very few times when only paid search and not SEO, or only SEO but not paid search. But it may depend, like one might be more competitive or more difficult than the other, depending on who's in your space. Or if it's a product where I didn't know I needed it until I was introduced to it by you and your ads, then that kind of product is much better suited to paid social. Um, so a good analogy is like the yellow pages versus an infomercial. Like where would that product most likely do well and sit? And in some cases, it's both, right? We've got quite a few clients where I'd say probably half our clients where doing both Google and Facebook, or Google and paid social, works extremely, extremely well, because there's an existing demand out there for their type of product category, but also people might not be waking up in the morning sort of super motivated to, look at their skincare, but then when they see the product in front of them, they get really excited about, what they have to offer, and that motivates them to come and buy.
One of the things that I want to get to, so I'll really want to go into like some of the tactics and things that you deploy, especially on the paid media side, because I love that world. I wish I was a better media buyer. I'm like, I really, really will take any advice that you have. But before doing so, like, I want to kind of go back to another part of what you do, which is the coaching side. So you've got Webtopia, the agency.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you do on the coaching side is you actually get startup brands, people who don't have an agency yet, maybe not even started yet, just about to, or just recently launched, getting them ready to have an agency. Like, there's a lot of stuff that you do to get them ready to actually begin the process of scaling.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through what that looks like and like what you're looking at when you work with someone like that?
Yeah. So what happens, I think, when your agency grows and your online profile grows, is you get a lot of brands coming to you and they think that they're ready for an agency. They've got like maybe $5,000 a month to spend on ads and they're super excited to scale. But we look at them and we say, well, actually, firstly, when you're spending $5,000 a month on ads and then you're going to spend, $4,000 or $5,000 a month paying the agency, that equation's never going to work out profitably, is it? Because the agency is eating a huge chunk of your overall marketing budget right there. So that's one problem. The other problem is the founder doesn't understand the media buying process very well. And so, yes, we are a great and very ethical agency, and we take our clients, we help to educate them on what works and all of that. But there are a lot of agencies that aren't great at that, and and also aren't very ethical. Just take your money whether you're ready or not. And if the founder doesn't understand the fundamentals of media buying, they're not going to be able to get the most out of that partnership. So I think there's a need for the founder to. This is, after developing the product, marketing is going to be the most important lever in the success of an e-commerce brand. I mean, you could talk to me about how customer service or, production or whatever is important, but if the marketing sucks, you're never going to get anywhere. So for them to try and outsource that too early when they don't understand it, I think is a huge mistake. So that's the other problem that I solve with the coaching. And then finally, often they aren't really ready for paid traffic. So their site is slow. The branding is not quite there yet. They haven't really figured out their market positioning even often. They're ready to throw some money at ads, but they don't actually know who they're talking to. They haven't developed personas. They haven't got their email flows set up. They haven't got, basic things on Google Ads, like having their brand keywords there so that people can find them when their SEO kind of is still in its very early stages. So that's where we identify that they're not quite ready for agency and don't want to throw them off to the sharks of some cheap agency that's just going to take their money and shrug their shoulders when it doesn't work. And that's when I suggest they come and join my group coaching program, where I can help them set all those fundamentals in place and teach them kind of the language of like e-commerce marketing, the metrics they should be looking for, the benchmarks that they need to compare themselves to, how to navigate their way around all of these different systems. So that's what we teach in the program.
Nice. So is that like a cohort-based program, or how does that?
No, we used to do it. I did the first cohort in like 2020 during lockdown, and that was really fun. But what I noticed was everyone who came in was at a different stage anyway. Some had ads running already, some didn't, and you're never going to get a group of people who are all at the same level of knowledge starting at the beginning. So we just drop people in when they want to join. And then we just make sure they go through an onboarding process so they get all the fundamentals. And then in the group calls, I think it's really great having different people of different levels on the calls, because people love helping each other. And, someone might be well advanced in Google Ads, but behind the curve on their email marketing. So they can all kind of support and help each other. So yeah, it's a really fun environment. It's a really intimate, small little coaching program with just 15 brands in it. And so I can really give people hands-on help. And I love it.
What happens when someone graduates the coaching program and becomes like an agency client, or do they stay coaching client, or and then they do agency? How does that? What do you?
Yeah, so typically they would become, once they've kind of like got all the fundamentals in place and we've got the ad account working how it should and they're ready to scale, they might sometimes go the route of hiring an in-house person. And and then that in-house person can sit within the coaching program and learn, or they might graduate to our agency or another agency, but usually it's our agency, if I'm honest. So we've definitely had a number of stories of people going from the coaching program and then now becoming agency clients, so we can help them scale up from
That's
there.
amazing. That's I'm sure that's like a dream come true for you, right?
Yeah, it's awesome.
So let's dive into the paid ad side a little bit, and I want to open with: do you remember the very first ad you ever ran on Facebook?
Oh, wow. That's such a cool question. Yes, I think I do. So it was for a Tom Jones concert.
That is actually fantastic.
That is not because I'm really, really old and like this was the 60s. That was because I was working for this business and yeah, they had all these different random businesses and actually that's a whole nother story. That business went bust because the founder was funneling the money in a really dodgy way, and like the whole thing fell apart, and that's actually how I was 7 months pregnant and why I started the agency. But while I was there, we were running Facebook ads and we were given, a budget to play around with. And we had this random Tom Jones concert to promote. So we ran ads for it and we targeted people who liked Tom Jones, who liked the Bee Gees, who liked, I don't know, there was a bunch of other bands in that kind of like genre. And it worked amazing. We optimized for purchase. We had a tracking event on the confirmation page and the algorithm went. This would have been, so my son was born in 2017. So it would have been, early 2017.
Money printer back in the day. I'm sure. Tom Jones. That's such a fan. I mean, I listen to Tom Jones. I probably would have been served that ad. Bee Gees as well. Do you remember the creative that you ran? Like,
I don't really. I think it probably was just like a really lame Canva image of like a picture of him saying concert in pink or something. I don't remember.
like in the date and just click here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's not terribly far from like, I think I ran my first Facebook campaign in 20, I don't know, it was 2018. And it was, I tried drop shipping women's swimsuits. That was my very first like e-commerce project. Or it was my second e-commerce project, but the first time I ran ads. And it went so poorly. Like it was so bad. I had no idea what I was doing, but learned a lot. Okay. So I have to ask this. So you're going through this like weird period of time at your old company. The founder's like doing some dodgy stuff. You're 7 months pregnant and you're like, I'm going to go start an agency. Like what possessed you in that moment outside of just tenacity and just like.
I often wonder. Well, I think I'd always had. So in my career, I'd never once been promoted in any role I'd had.
Wow.
Now, partly that was because I always kind of jumped ship. I lasted usually about a year in a job. I would like get in there. I would like fix things up for the brand. I would like get things working and then I'd just be bored and then I'd start searching the job pages. So, I think that's part of why I never got promoted. Also, I used to make small little stupid mistakes, and now I have a team I'm more like the visionary, and they are checking all the details. And I think that's the great thing about being an entrepreneur is you can hire for your weaknesses and hire a team that really are the yin to your yang. But yeah, so I was 7 months pregnant. This guy he literally, I mean, it was all over the Financial Times. It was a huge story. We were contacted by journalists. It was crazy. But yeah, they rolled us into a room. They told us, we can't pay your final paycheck. You won't get maternity pay. You won't get any payout at all. So they were breaking the law, and we had to like take them to court just to get them shut down. It was like super dramatic, super crazy.
Wow.
So I just put out the call out to like get some freelance work because I was the primary breadwinner in my family as well. And I instantly got all this freelance work, and I'd always had this thing in the back of my mind. I'd love to freelance. I'd love to like do that. But, how do you get work and like, how do you even start? I think I'll just take the safe route and work for these companies and keep jumping ship every time I get bored. And then I And then I got so much freelance work. So when my son was little and I sort of had freelance nannies helping me and all sorts of kind of complicated childcare arrangements. And I was doing this freelance work and like looking after my baby, and it was fun and I was enjoying it. And so about, I think, a year and a half, my son was about a year and a half, I officially launched the agency as an agency brand and started hiring at that time freelancers. And then I took on my first full-timer about like probably 6 months after that. And then the pandemic hit in 2020. So that was a year and a half into my agency, and we really just rode that wave because we were in ecom. Everything was just going crazy.
It was gangbusters. Oh yeah. I had the express privilege of selling soap during the pandemic. I ran a soap company. It was like, as close to a money printer as it could get, It was insane.
That's awesome.
That's so wild. So like 7 months pregnant, you're up. I mean, basically it was like almost like you had no other choice but to do it, right? In a way, but it was like the best decision ever. It sounds like.
Totally. I'm so grateful. Like, it was crazy at the time, but it wasn't like a sob story. Like there was 12 of us. We were in it together. We had like this kind of wartime spirit together of like trying to take this huge company to court and get them. So we ultimately did get a small payout from the government. Like there's a fund, but it was crazy time, but I think it was amazing because it forced me to do what I'd always wanted to do, and like instantly saw that it was like going to be possible, and also was going to work well with motherhood, right? Because I would be able to set my own schedule and all of that. Yeah.
And so let's fast forward a little bit. You're in the thick of it. You've had, you've been able to experience like the COVID boom, 2020 in e-com, and then obviously a little bit of a contraction the last couple of years. But it's 2023. It's early 2023. We're just starting Q2. Walk us through some of your high level strategic insights or tactical insights on media buying in the current landscape.
Yeah, sure. So I guess the big talk of the town at the moment in the Facebook space, in the Meta, we should say, space, is Advantage Plus. So these campaigns, for those who aren't kind of aware, are the most automated campaign available that Facebook's ever created. Some would argue they've just done it to kind of cut out the media buyer's role and get the best results for the client possible without any kind of decision making on the client side. What we have seen is like we tend to run Advantage Plus campaigns alongside more traditional campaigns, and sometimes they work better, sometimes they work not as well, and it's important to be always following the data and doing little tweaks to find ways to get it to work better. And they work well in some accounts and not others. And we've tested in some accounts running purely Advantage Plus, and that's worked not so well for most of the accounts we've tried. It tends to work best alongside. There's some best practice I can talk you through. So Meta recommends 20 to 30 creatives per campaign. We would say, so Advantage Plus really is for advertisers spending 10K a month or more on ads. Like if you're spending less than that, it's probably not going to work for you because of the amount of data that it needs. And you also want to be using pre-tested creative. So if you're just getting started and you don't know what creative works or what angles are working or which videos or hooks are going to work best for your brand, do a process of testing first and get some tried and true creative that you can plug into your Advantage Plus campaign, because that's going to work better. We recommend when you first launch it, try with 100% new customers. So put your 0% existing customer budget, your existing customer budget to zero. That forces it to not just rely on retargeting and existing customers to make the results look really good. So those are the kind of the main advice we would say. More advanced techniques on Advantage Plus are like people saying things like separating out different creative types or into different Advantage Plus campaigns. That's against Meta's advice, but again, when did we ever listen to them? So that's definitely a technique to try. One thing we've noticed is when we have catalogs sitting within Advantage Plus, the catalog will steal all of the budget. So what we've found is sometimes separating the catalog into a different Advantage Plus and then having your more traditional ads in another Advantage Plus can mean you kind of reach bigger, more segments of the market, and you can scale even further or horizontally scale. So that is one. That's sort of some general advice on Advantage Plus. Any questions on that before I dive into?
Oh, there's like so much. But before I think we go deeper on the Advantage Plus side, one of the things I'd love to do is talk a little bit about creative testing outside of Advantage Plus. So is this like you're setting up a separate like purchase optimized CBO campaign, CBO being campaign budget optimization, to test, ad creative? Do you still use ABO? How do you go about testing creative?
Yeah, there's so many different ways you can test creative, and it really depends on the account and like how much creative you've got, how much budget you've got for testing, how many different angles, how quickly you want to test a bunch of different angles or whatever. But and then ABO versus CBO, that the pendulum just keeps swinging back and forth there. We've been doing mostly ABO for most of our accounts for quite a while now, but we've started to see like in a few accounts or like in other media buyers I talk to saying that CBO is starting to kind of have a little resurgence. So the jury's still out on that one. I think ABO at this point in time is probably the best if you're wanting to test other things and, keep everything constant, then have an ABO so that you're just focusing in on that one element. So testing frameworks that you can use. So smaller budgets, I would recommend you have one or two. If your budget is so small that you only have enough money for a couple of ad sets, then you're going to be testing your creative within your always on business as usual ad sets. So in that case, you want to, for instance, you might have 3 ads running, and you might switch out 1 or 2 of them every week or two. So the best one you keep in there, and then you switch in like some new creative to see if you can get it to outperform the existing creative. So that's for like a lower budget campaign or account. That's what you would do. For accounts that are a little bit bigger, you might have a dedicated creative testing campaign. You might run it to your best audience, but on a slightly lower budget than what you're running your main campaigns, and you throw new creative in there for testing. So you could throw 5 or 6 creatives in there and test them all at once, and see which ones work best. Another, again, there's so many different ways to skin a cat, but another way of testing is to separate different personas per ad set. So you might say, okay, we're going to go after the yoga mums in this ad set. We're going to go after the racing car drivers in another. You might have very different personas that you're targeting for your one brand. And so by separating them into their own ad set, you can see which personas perform best against each other, but you can also see which angles and messages work for that particular persona. And you're then training that particular ad set to find those types of audiences. So what we know now is like generally the targeting we're setting with an ad set is more like a guardrail. It's not gone are the days of like really going deep and identifying a really specific persona and putting really detailed interests into an ad set. We're more likely to have, it's sort of like a mega ad set with stacked interests, or even completely broad, or maybe just with like, age range or gender kind of constraints. And then the ad itself, we say the ad is the targeting. So the ad creative is calling out the customer or the customer persona. And so they can self-identify, and then Facebook's using those indicators in order to show the ad to more people that are similar to that. So that lends itself well to testing your creative in kind of thematic persona-based groupings. So those are kind of the main different ways that we might test creative. But, just testing it in your main ad sets can work really well if you're just getting started with creative testing and not overcomplicating things. If you don't have a lot of budget for testing, having separate testing ad sets can really spike your costs. And I guess the other thing you've got to always bear in mind is, the more testing you're doing, the less efficient your account is going to be during that testing process. So make sure you build in budget that you're kind of allocating to testing, so that when you're, whoever you're reporting back to, you're not getting told that, the ad account's now not performing. Well, it's actually on purpose. We've dedicated this budget towards testing so that we can have future better performance.
Amazing. That was probably one of the most valuable, like 10, 15 minutes of my life. And especially on the podcast, I think like being able to like walk through the frameworks very clearly, I think is you blew it out of the park. So we've got a couple of strategies now on how we can test creative and test in general, like personas, audiences, etc. And we take those winning piece of creative, those learnings, we pump them over to ASC, Advantage Plus shopping campaigns. Walk us through when you move them over into ASC, and you told us a little bit of like the high level, like the setup stuff. How do we go from, spending, I don't know what your floor is typically for clients, but like, let's say $250 a day to spending $10,000 a day? What are the steps in between to actually scale?
Yeah, so that's a great question in terms of so the first part of the question is how you walk those creatives over. So first and foremost, like Advantage Plus is pretty damn easy to set up, and that's the whole point of it. So as long as you've got those 20 to 30 creatives, ideally 20 to 30, we say at least 10, right? 10 creatives in the campaign. And as long as you've got a good amount of budget. So I think at last count, and I can verify this, Facebook is saying they need $50 a day per creative. So if you're doing 10 creatives, you should be running $500 a day in Advantage Plus. So you do need to start Advantage Plus with a decent budget for it to work. There's a lot of competition, especially in the US, a lot of people using Advantage Plus. So you need to kind of be in to win and give the algorithm enough data. I think that's where a lot of people fall down, or it doesn't work for them, as if they're not giving it enough data. So you need to start it at a decent budget. And, you're running it to, a tested landing page or tested landing pages, you're running it to a site that works and that, you've got enough product, all of that good stuff that's, as is really, really important. And then, when you first launch it, you do need to kind of really not touch it. You need to let it run. You need to hold your horses and not make any changes or tweaks, and really let the algorithm kick in and figure things out. And it can be tough at first, especially if you're a founder and you're running your campaigns yourself, but you really do have to stick to your ground and let it run. And then once it's delivering good results, like scaling it, that's the great thing about it, is it can be scaled quite fast. So you can be, adding 10% a day easily, and pushing that up. And as long as you're not seeing any signs of fatigue, you can keep scaling it. The other thing I would say, though, about scale is what we say is the more you scale, if you're, wanting to hit those really big numbers, you are going to have a diverse range of strategies. So you could probably hit some quite good scale with Advantage Plus, but the really big accounts that we work on need to have a range of different kind of portions of the market that they're going after. So different personas, targeting different personas with different messages is one kind of way of horizontal scaling. Another is using different objectives too. So in the early stages, most e-com brands will always optimize for purchase. But once you hit to a certain point of scale and you want to continue to scale, you might want to bring in some a portion of your budget towards brand awareness, a portion of your budget towards capturing email addresses and then nurturing people through a funnel. You might do a bit of video view campaigns at the top of the funnel and then retarget those video views with your purchase campaigns. We don't do that in the early stages. I think that's a mistake that a lot of e-com brands make, is trying to do those kind of things early on, when actually, no, you just want to optimize for purchase until you've kind of maxed that portion out. But once you start scaling, you're going to have to try and reach different people in different ways. People that take longer to convert, people that want to be nurtured via email, people that like to watch videos for months and months before they buy a product. So when you really are hitting scale, that's when you're going to have to be, really wide-ranging in your approach. Pre-sale articles, that's another one that works well at that kind of stage of scale. So where you're running ads to kind of an advertorial type of article rather than a product page. Ezra Firestone's very famous for talking about this with his brand Boom, where he sends people to this article that's 5 tips for makeup for over 50-year-olds or something like that. And it's like one of his best tactics ever. And he sends traffic there and then he retargets them and gets them kind of into his funnel that way.
I read that tweet today, or he posted a video about it recently, where it's like he runs traffic to that page, and then in the retargeting just goes straight back to that page if they haven't purchased, which I thought that was actually pretty interesting that he didn't retarget.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't realized that. But yeah, that article, man, oh man, that must be one of the most read articles on the internet. I just don't know how he keeps finding new people for it. Mm-hmm. But I guess he's been around for a while and people keep aging into his age bracket. But yeah, it's an amazing, and he's, I guess, kept refining that page and improving it over the years. And you should check it out if you're wanting to research techniques. I think it's it's just boom, 5 techniques, makeup techniques for the over 50s or something like that. And you'll find that article and you can, hack his funnel.
That's amazing. Listicles, we love them. We have got a couple of templates. It's one of the things like I love recommending to people because it's like low lift. You can probably figure out 5 reasons why someone needs your product. If not, another thing I saw Ezra Firestone do today was, I just went on like an Ezra Firestone tear. I don't know if you had tweeted about it or someone else had.
Yeah.
And he took like 1,000 reviews. Like he did like 125 reviews at a time, copied and pasted into ChatGPT, and said, hey, like, give me the 5 reasons why someone buys this product. And then like summarizes using the review for you. So like the stuff can write itself, like, and for next to no money. So
that's awesome.
If you're listening and you're like, I don't know how to do this, I don't know what to do, ChatGPT, put your reviews in there, tell it to like scrape your reviews and build out the 5 reasons why. Then go in, find one of our templates and set up your landing page. That's my recommendation there.
Yeah, that's an awesome recommendation because that's part of our process is to like mine reviews, but that's a nice little hack just to make the heavy lifting part of it easier. Love it.
So when you talk about like small budgets and big budgets, what do you believe is like the minimum threshold for when you like really want to like double down on ads? Is it, because I know you were like, at the beginning, if you have $5,000 to spend, maybe like do other things to get a little bit more traction. But when's like the first time to start investing heavily on the ad side?
Yeah. So assume you've got like your core flows in place, welcome series, post-purchase, abandoned cart, that kind of thing. And your site's, fast, it's converting at 1% or higher and considerably higher if you're, lower ticket as well. Then I think $5,000 is a good place to start. You can start on lower. I think the challenge that smaller brands have is they think, I'll start on lower, and when I get good results, when I start getting return on investment, then I'll use that money to pay for more ads. But that's really not the way of looking at it. I think people should see the investment in ad as more like, okay, you've got an e-com store. You didn't have to pay rent on a premises in the center of town. What you do have to pay is you have to buy data to figure out how to get people to your store. And so investing in that data is investing in buying ads. And it's not going to work straight away. If you put the constraint on yourself that it needs to work in order for me to do more of it, then you're bound to fail from the get-go. If you instead see it as like, I'm investing this money in order to get to the point where it does work, and as long as you've had good advice that like it's a good fit for your brand, then that's a good way to look at it, and it should work. So 5,000, you could start a little bit lower if you're low ticket and have high conversion rate. So it's actually more about how many conversions a day am I going to be able to drive through the platform. So ideally, you need to be driving 2 conversions per ad set per day, and like the most basic campaign probably needs 2 ad sets top of funnel and at least 1 retargeting ad set. Nowadays, you can maybe get away without retargeting as well and just roll that into your top of funnel. But that's, debatable whether, for some that'll work, for some that won't. So, you need 2 conversions a day. So if your conversion rate is, let's keep the numbers simple, if your conversion rate is 1%, then you need 100 clicks to get a conversion. And if it costs $1 a click, then you need $100 per conversion, right? So you can work that equation up or down and figure out how much you need to spend per day to get enough conversions to feed the algorithm to be able to get it to optimize.
I know that we're going to have another one of these conversations because there's just so much to cover, and you're doing such a great job of taking back to like first principles, like kind of explain like I'm 5 to this, and it's so valuable. But I want to quickly touch upon some case studies that you have or some like really big wins. Do you have any short stories from the trenches that you could share about you walking through, like walking a founder or a brand through these processes, and then on the outside, they come out a 7-8 figure brand?
Yeah, sure. So one of my favorite case studies is one of our longest running clients. It's a baby products brand. Again, baby products, mass appeal, but she has a really unique take on it. Again, I can't say who she is because she's so successful and she doesn't want anyone to copy her. But it's such a great example of a brand that's like a perfect fit for ecom and a great partnership where we've kind of been able to really run with things. So she came to me initially for shopping ads. So we started with Google Shopping, we started with Google Search, and that worked pretty well straight away. And I suggested that we then run Facebook ads. We started with retargeting, and instantly we saw a big lift in terms of conversions for her. And so we started running top of funnel. Now, why have we been able to scale her so significantly? And now she's a multi 7-figure brand. Is because firstly the product's great, okay, and she's got a good margin, so she's able to afford to pay for the ads within the margin. Her average order value is over £150, so it's in that really lovely sweet spot, I think, where it's not so high ticket that it's not you can't buy it on impulse. But it's high enough that there's good margin left over to pay for the ads and still have profit left over. I think that's a really key thing that people need to understand. Like if your AOV is really low, then you need to have a really good lifetime value, and then you need to be really good at retention. So that brings the extra complicatedness into it. Whereas if you're from the get-go, your average order value is over $150, like that's going to make things a little bit easier for you. So we the classic thing that we would always do is we get to know the customer. What is it that's driving this customer? Has she interviewed them? If not, we encourage our clients to interview their customers, get to really understand what's driving them. What are their frustrations? What are their pain points? What are they worried about? What's keeping them up at night? How are we kind of understanding that customer and what they care about? And then we're coming up with a whole bunch of different ad angles that are going to speak to those different pain points and those different personas. Then we develop those into creative. So we want to do a mixture of video, carousel, catalog ads as well, and just straight up static ads. We want to use social proof in the ads. So we want to have like customer quotes, videos from customers, social video that's, shot on a phone that looks really authentic. But we might also want to test more polished for this particular brand. It's more high end. So she has some really lovely polished imagery that we use. And then we put together a testing plan. So we've got a plan of action of what we're going to test when, what elements are we going to test in what order. And then we use the data to kind of decide the next step in the process. We have almost like a decision tree that we've developed within the agency that the team use. So like, if this happens, then we do this. If this happens, then we do this. So for instance, if we've got a piece of creative that we're analyzing, if this piece of creative is working and this piece of creative isn't, let's look at is it the hook rate? So the fact that people are running, jumping past the ad without watching it. So the hook rate is too low. So we might change the hook at the beginning and then the ad might start to perform. Or the hook rate might be good, but the hold rate is bad. So people are watching the first 3 seconds, but then they're getting bored. So we're analyzing the data on quite a deep level to try and figure out how the creative can be improved. There's a whole iteration process that we've developed so that we can take like a creative that's either great creative that's worked and create iterations that will work again, or creative that's kind of working okay but needs to be better, so that we're not always reinventing the wheel and coming up with whole new creative ideas and whole new creative angles every time, because that's super expensive for brands, right? So we want to make creative that has a lot of life to it, and that job of producing the creative and the designers that were involved in everything that's involved gets the most bang for its buck. So iterations are a big part of the process of continually developing new creative. We continue to run that. I mean, we've been running campaigns for this brand for years now, so we've continued to scale her. She's got very clear CPA goals that she has given us. So we are able to scale as long as we're hitting those KPIs in terms of CPA. And then also she's got stock challenges because the product's quite big. So we have to always make sure that we don't deliver too many sales if she doesn't have the stock. So we're kind of balancing those things and having that back and forth with the client about stock levels and, what's coming up in terms of the different colors and options that are there, and, whether if something's going to run out soon, we stop running ads of that particular style. So we're really working as like an arm of our clients' business, and we're the kind of outsourced marketing department, really.
That right there for me is my indication of this is a good agency. Like this is a good team. It's not just enough to like deliver customers and orders, right? But like having the foresight, the desire to be integrated deeply enough to where you're looking at the inventory levels, you're able to work with them on the forecast and understand, okay, like if we keep running this campaign at this pace, we're going to create this like massive supply chain issue. And like, what does
Yeah.
that impact on I mean, all of those things kind of go into scale. So I think it's amazing that you're doing that. And again, just for those of you listening, if you're ever interviewing an agency and you're trying to figure out like, hey, like what are they capable of? Like, is this a good thing or not? See if they do that, because that is, I think, like a mark of a really, really good team.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. One thing on that, sorry to interrupt, is forecasting. That is, I didn't mention that, but that is a key part. And I think one thing that makes us a bit different as an agency. So every client that's on our books has a forecast that we not only put together for them, but that we adjust every month based on what we're seeing. So we can accurately predict for them what their performance is going to be and how much revenue we can drive for them based on the performance indicators that we're seeing. So we're looking at levers like what is the cost per click that we're getting and what we're seeing, what we're expecting based on seasonality, what's their conversion rate, how do we expect it to improve when they run a sale or when they launch a new product, what's their average order value, and like what improvements do we expect to see on that. And we plug those into our forecasting system, spits out a very accurate forecast for them. And then if we're wrong, we look back and see, well, where were we wrong? Was it the cost per click? Was it the conversion rate? And how can we adjust what we're doing to get closer to the forecast again? So I think that helps brands of the stage we work with, who are very much having to juggle, cash flow and stock and all of that very accurately in order to, stay afloat and keep growing.
Is that a forecasting tool that's publicly available, or is that something that you built internally?
Yeah, so funnily enough, so it's a simple spreadsheet, and we've just developed like the formulas within it. So and I am actually going to be releasing this on my LinkedIn. So follow me on LinkedIn. This won't come out until after I released it, but we can make sure, like, send me an email, hello@webtopia.co, and I can send you the template. We're going to release it to the world and let people use it. And you basically will just plug in 4 numbers in there, as well as your budgets or your goal revenue, and it will spit out a forecast for you. So it's a pretty awesome Google Doc that we've
Oh,
decided to
amazing.
let the world have. Yeah.
And so we're coming up close on time. But before we go, I've got 3 more things that I want to ask you. The first is related to another resource that you have on your website right now, webtopia.co, and it's a checklist.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a little bit about what that is? This and just for reference, these links will be in the show notes as well, so you'll be
Yeah.
able to access these, download these. But yeah, tell us about the checklist.
Yeah. So the checklist is something that we developed like internally, like when we were looking at clients and kind of assessing them and helping them, figure out what they needed to do to grow. And it comes back, I guess, to that kind of blueprint that theoretically exists out there for how to grow an e-com brand. So this is a living document that we've created. It's a Google Doc we've created within the agency, and it has the kind of 4 pillars of like conversion rate optimization, paid social, Google Ads, and email marketing. What are those kind of like important elements you should have in place, and what's working right now as well? Like, so at the moment, if a brand didn't have Advantage Plus running in their account and they were spending more than 10K a month, that would be something that they should definitely add in,
Mm-hmm.
so that we keep that document updated. And yeah, it's available. We will put the link in the show notes. You can just you just sign up with your email, and then we send it over to you, and you can then use that Google Doc to adapt, make your own plan, basically.
I actually downloaded it just before we jumped on, so I know I'm going to run a couple of my friends' stores through it. Repo is actually in the process of building our own little merch store as well, so I will put
Oh, fun.
our little merch store through it as well. Another thing that you have resource wise, and you'll see this on the page when you fill it out, is your ad audits. So you actually, like, for those of you that want to like go in and work with Jessie a little deeper, she does these ad account audits, and I think that's like a really great resource as well.
Yeah. Yeah, our ad audits are really, really detailed. So before we work consider working with a brand, we want to make sure that, like, we really think we can help them and we really understand the account that we're pitching to work on. And so those audits are something that we do to make sure a client is a good fit. But even if a client decides not to work with us, that audit, they're going to walk away with a ton of value and a ton of ideas. And we love doing them. So yeah, get in touch if you're interested in, if you're a brand and you're looking to get, a second pair of eyes on your ad account and see what you might be missing.
Amazing. Before we come up on time, I've got 2 more questions for you. The first one has to do with your business, with Webtopia and your coaching business. And the second one has to do with you personally. I'm going to start with the business one, which is, what is coming next? What can people in the space look forward to that you're putting out? Or what are you really excited about building or working on this year?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So we've started to kind of quietly launch Creative as a standalone service. So we noticed that there's kind of a movement of brand, because of things like Advantage Plus, which make the media buying process a little easier and less technical. We're seeing brands running ads in-house. There's always been brands running ads in-house as well, but often they don't have the capacity to create great ad creative. And we know we're really good at that. We've got lots of, examples of awesome creative we've created for our clients. So we're going to be launching that publicly soon. Probably by the time this podcast comes out, we'll have that available as a service people can use. And then I guess the other thing I'm excited about is just really this whole AI space and what that's going to do for the agency world, like how we can kind of use AI to make our work more effective, more efficient, to come up with better ideas, to free our team to do the exciting, interesting thinking and less of the kind of repetitive work. I think there's so much opportunity there. I'm excited to watch that space. It's scary, it's terrifying, but let's take a glass half full approach and be at the forefront.
So last week we actually started working on Replo AI. So it's stuff as simple as taking your product description and your imagery and creating, website copy for your landing pages, all the way to tell us what your objective is. I want to increase AOV. I want to increase conversions. I want to build a listicle, and then it'll spit out the entire landing page top to bottom with copy, imagery, creative. That's the level of depth that we're working on. We're really excited to build that out and roll it out. But
That's
awesome.
Awesome.
I was definitely sitting there and I was like, will you need my opinion on things ever? It's like the computer is going to know. The algorithm knows better than I do at this point on the meta side and the ad side. But I think that we still need, to your point, the human touch, the strategy, being able to pull everything together, being able to think creatively. That it's hard to replace, and you can't. And it's unique to each brand. So I'm excited too. I'm very energized by that. And to close it out for today, the question that I have for you, that was the personal question, is, knowing everything you know now, going back to the very start of your career, what piece of advice would you give yourself, or what would you do differently?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Should I have started to be an entrepreneur sooner? I see these 20-somethings, that are doing amazing with their own businesses. And I was so afraid to do that. But then at the same time, I learned so much being on the other side of the fence that I think makes me a good leader and a good manager. I know what it's like to have a dumb boss, and I don't, so maybe I would say start a little bit sooner. Maybe start 5 years before you have your kid would be.
I'm sure that would, But that's amazing. Jessie, this has been, again, one of the most informative, in-depth conversations that we've had on the podcast. I really love getting into the trenches. I hope that you have some time to do this again, because I'd love to have you on the show again. And I think
love to.
Part 2, we can go in even deeper on some of the tactics and strategies that are working. Maybe even look at some data together. But again, thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone, go check out webtopia.co. Check out Jessie on Twitter. And overall, really, really appreciate you being on here and taking the time to jam with me today.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I had so much fun.
Amazing. This has been another amazing episode of Design to Convert, and we shall see you next time.